There is a deal to be done, and I urge both the local leaders and the trade unions to get back round the table.
17,000 tonnes of rubbish currently sit rotting gently in the streets of Birmingham this afternoon. The government has been accused of sitting on its hands over the Birmingham bin strike as negotiations in the dispute descend into farce, according to Sharon, who is the leader of the Unite Union.
This dispute centres around bin workers that have been asked to go from £32,000 to £24,000 a year. That is £8,000 cut in pay, which is a quarter of their wages. And I don't think anyone listening, Tom, would think that that was an acceptable thing for these workers to have to do. So the reason that I have been speaking to central government and why I think it's so critical they intervene is that central government own the debt of Birmingham City Council. It's a £3.9 billion debt. And the council pay £250 million a year off that debt, and they have to pay a higher than usual interest rate. And what I'm saying to the government is that what they need to do is to either cancel the debt, and I'm sure they have no appetite for that, that's what I'm hearing, or restructure the debt. And that is why it's absolutely critical that central government is involved in the negotiations, because the reason that these workers have been asked to take this level of pay cut is because the council's in such a difficult position financially. And we need those decision makers round the table, restructure the debt, and let's get everybody back to work.
Why do you think the government aren't getting involved?
Well, look, I think listening to Keir in the Commons on Wednesday, he was clearly saying it's a local dispute. That is a misunderstanding of the dispute. You've got a situation here where you have a council that want to take a quarter of the pay away from these workers. They were going to work.
That's a council decision. That cannot be a central government decision, Sharon. Otherwise, what's the point of having a council?
Well, it's a decision taken by the council, a wrong decision, and that's why we're out on strike, because nobody should accept, and absolutely, I certainly don't accept, that these workers have been asked to give up a quarter of their pay. That is totally and utterly unacceptable. The bad decisions taken were not their fault. Austerity was not their fault. Why does everyday people always pay?
Sure, but aside from that, we're talking about who, in what way you expect the government to get involved.
Indeed,
there's no point in having a council at all if the government's going to get involved in individual pay awards to binmen in local areas, however right or wrong the claim.
Well, yes, but first of all, Tom, this is not a pay award. They are cutting workers' pay. And secondly, this council is subject to commissioners because it is bankrupt, and those commissioners report directly to the government. Now, in the negotiations, you've got HR people in there, but the leader of the council isn't in there, and the commissioner's not in there. But every time the team are in trying to do a deal, they come out and say the HR people will have to go back to the commissioner. So in truth, the real decision makers are not in the room. So cutting to the chase, if the government own the debt that is causing Birmingham City Council to make these decisions, if the commissioner is the real decision maker and it isn't really the HR people in the room, then what it says to me is, can we please get the decision makers in the room? I will be available anytime, any place, anywhere, whenever they want to, so we can get round the table and stop what is going on in Birmingham. It's not fair to the workers, and it's certainly not fair to the community of Birmingham.
Presumably you accept, as the union involved here, some degree of responsibility for the 17,000 tonnes of rubbish that are now piling up on the streets of Britain's second city. How much longer can this go on for?
Well, look, I am disgusted about the way that this is panning out. I'm disgusted that these workers have been asked to give up a quarter of their pay. And I challenge anybody to say that if they go into work of a morning and their grade has been removed from the system and their employer says to them, by the way, in 6 months' time, £8,000 of your pay is going to be removed, that they would do everything in their power.
So this is going to keep going.
In order to defend. Well, look, what I hope will happen, and that's why I have spoken to the government. That's why I've asked the government to intervene. And what I hope will happen is an understanding here. And by the way, Tom, this is not the only council that I believe cuts are going to happen in. No. We've had them because of Austerity Mark 1. We're going to go down to Austerity Mark 2 if we're not careful. These debts that these councils have are racking up, and they are taking it out. They are attacking the workers in some way to try to make the books and the numbers add up.
Is this a Labour government? Possible. Just finally, Sharon, is this a Labour government, in your view, on the side of working people?
Well, look, what I want them to do is to be on the side of working people. These are litmus tests. These are litmus tests. You've got workers having pay cut under a Labour government. Don't let it happen.
Sharon Graham is the leader of the Unite Union.